Mrs. Stanley Moore, Suzanne, Magistrate, Honorable Chief Justice, Sir Dennis Byron, and all you distinguished people gathered here to celebrate the life of Mr. Stanley Moore. Yesterday morning, as I was returning from the International Court of Justice, the first call I received when I disembarked the aircraft was from Mrs. Moore, who invited me to this event. And when I reflected upon the life of Justice Stanley Moore, I felt I would not have been able to do justice to his outstanding career unless I jotted a few notes. So I saw the Chief Justice roll her eyes when she saw me in my folder. But I will be as brief as I possibly can. And it's simply in deference to Justice Moore. Stanley Moore was born on July 1st, 1935 in New Amsterdam, Berbice, to Suriname's mother, Olive Isabella Walcott Moore, and Guyanese father, Llewellyn Corrett Moore. The family moved to Kitty when Stanley was merely 2 years old. His father, a marine engineer, enlisted with troops in World War II and never returned home. His mother, a seamstress, raised him and his brother Carlisle Moore as a single parent, and with the assistance of relatives of both his mother and father, education became a priority for the Moore boys. Justice Moore attended St. James, the Less Anglican School, and Tutorial High School. There was nothing less about Justice Moore, who was among the first batch of students at Tutorial High to write and pass the Cambridge London Sixth Form exams. After completing high school, Justice Moore started as a pupil teacher at that school, Tutorial High, and then worked as a custom officer for Her Majesty's Customs Department, where his interest in law apparently was first ignited. I have read that since he could not afford a formal education, Justice Moore then began studying law on his own, and eventually joined a law class with the likes of Desiree Bernard, Duke Pollard, Muhammad Ayub Ali Magdoum, Aubrey Fitzronald Bishop, and Rex McKay, under whom he started out practice as his junior, and then with whom he co-founded McKay and Moore. Justice Moore obtained his LLB degree from London University whilst working as a manager at Booker's Enterprise. He then enrolled at Lincoln Inn University to study for the English bar exams. In 1970, on completion of his final bar exams, Justice Moore earned a Commonwealth Scholarship to pursue a master's degree at the prestigious University College London. This was no mean accomplishment. Justice Moore was called to the bar in Guyana on the 25th of July, 1970. To put this in proper historical context, Justice Moore would have been among the first batch of lawyers to be called in Guyana's post-independence era, and indeed in the year 1970, the year of the Republic. At that time, Justice Moore had to be among the first lawyers in post-colonial Guyana qualified with a Master's of Law. These are feats in a time of post-colonial Guyana from a man of extremely humble beginnings that only an elite few can claim to have achieved. Justice Moore was one of the elite few trailblazing in his many distinguished firsts in our legal landscape. Justice Moore practiced at the civil and criminal bars, and as mentioned before, co-founded the law firm of McKay and Moore, one of the lasting partnerships in our legal profession. Just 9 years after he was called to the bar, Justice Moore was appointed to the bench in Guyana in 1979. And his many laudable judgments contributed to Guyana's indigenous jurisprudence, and in one aspect of his remarkable first, but his contribution to the law went beyond that. He lectured at the University of Guyana's law program and taught many of our early generation of distinguished legal minds trained in the Caribbean. I distinctly recall students of his being former Chancellor Carl Singh, former Chief Justice Ian Chang, Senior Counsel Boston is here. While I was speaking with Sir Dennis Byron and sharing a drink with Sir Dennis Byron, one of his students called me from Montana to express his condolences and to remind me what an excellent teacher he was in criminal law. Not unlike many lawyers, Justice Moore dabbled in politics, serving as a member of Parliament from 1981 to 1982 and as Minister of Home Affairs under the Fox-Burnham administration. His other political appointments included Attorney General of Montserrat in 1990 and the acting governor of Montserrat, representing Her Majesty the Queen. In 1992, Justice Moore was appointed a Supreme Court judge in the Eastern Caribbean, spending his first stint in Grenada until 1996 and second in the British Virgin Islands until 2000. After that, he served as a judge on the Bahamas Supreme Court. Following his quote-unquote retirement, he was appointed a judge in the Court of Appeal in two African jurisdictions, the Republic of Botswana from 2004 to 2012, and the Kingdom of Eswatini, former Swaziland, from 2010 to 2014. In these two African jurisdictions, which he fondly called his own home, Justice Moore served in those countries' highest courts. And that is a testament not only to his tenacity, and it's a testament to his tenacity and the intellectual depth of the man, achieving the highest level of professional excellence in and out of Guyana. Justice Moore returned to Guyana in 2016 on the urging of his mentor and friend, Senior Counsel Rex McKay. At age 85, Justice Moore decided it was yet too early to retire and decided to continue practicing law at the civil and criminal bar as a partner in the law firm of McKay and Moore. Last year, still in active practice, he said to the press in an interview, quote, "Lawyers don't stop working until their minds stop. I just can't retire and go home. I think it's the way we lawyers are built." I believe most lawyers here share that view. In fact, the other day, someone called me and asked me if I was busy. And I said that I'll be busy until I die. Sir Byron spoke about some of the distinguished judgments that Justice Stanley Moore rendered. And I have a list of them here. Gary versus the Attorney General of Grenada, 2001, UK PC, page 30. Daly against Daly, 2003, UK PC, page 65. And that was from the British Virgin Islands. Archer against Registrar General, 2004, UK PC, page 31, from the Bahamas. Durishoreland and Talanga Stiff Tongue, 2006, UK PC 58, the Bahamas. Oliver against the Queen, 2007, UK PC 9, Bahamas. And Innis versus St. Christopher and Nevis, 2008, UK PC 42, St. Kitts and Nevis. In all of these 6 cases, the Privy Council upheld the first instance judgment of Justice Moore. There is one case in particular out of Swaziland that I would particularly like to mention because I've used it both in court and in my parliamentary speeches. And it is the case of Swaziland Independent Publishers Limited and another, 2014, SZSC, Swaziland Supreme Court, in the year in the year 2014. It's a constitutional decision delivered by Justice Moore on press freedom, where Justice Moore sat as an appeal court judge in the Supreme Court of Swaziland. And the issue that he addressed, obviously, was the one of the pervasive issue of freedom of expression. And oftentimes we read judgments that seek to glorify, and rightfully so, this powerful right of freedom of expression, and to put it on its right philosophical and constitutional pedestal. But very few times do we get the other side of the right, and that is the responsibility that the right carries. And those who wish to practice that those who wish to exercise that cherished right, sometimes they forget the responsibility that goes with that right. And the entire judgment was dedicated towards emphasizing the responsibility that that right carries, in particular from the perspective of the press. In this case, a lawyer and a journalist had published articles regarding, two articles regarding the judgment of a case. And Justice Moore clinically separated the two articles, where he was able to illustrate and demonstrate that one was outspoken criticism permissible and one was scandalizing the judiciary. And in one of his beautifully written paragraphs, and you know he was a man of great linguistic elegance when he put pen to paper, he said this, and I quote, "The two articles in The Nation which are the subject matter of these appeals illustrate the ancient principle that all good things must be enjoyed in moderation. No freedom is totally and absolutely free. All freedoms are subject to two principal qualifications, the right of others and the public interest." These two articles, written by the same person, illustrate the kind of searching and critical comment which represents the legitimate exercise of freedom of the press on the one hand, and the kind of article which strays into the impermissible terrain of scandalizing the court, unquote. Justice Moore drew a line between acceptable criticism in one of the articles, which used such words as rubbish, criminal, and treasonous in describing particular court decisions, and unacceptable criticism in the other article, which undermines the public confidence in the judiciary. Speaking of the latter, Justice Moore elegantly wrote, and I quote again, "One final observation. Having plunged his contemptuous knife into the heart of the judiciary to its inglorious hilt, the author, as if infused with the fiendish glee, could not resist the almost sadistic urge to give it one final twist by twice addressing the acting Chief Justice, whose office lies at the pinnacle of the judiciary of this kingdom, by the title of Your Worship, which is the fitting form of address for judicial officers who are members of what Lord Diplock described as the lower judiciary. The author disdained even to afford the Honorable Acting Chief Justice the courtesy of his proper form of address. The writer's guilt of the offense of scandalizing the court has, on the evidence dripping from his own scurrilous pen, been overwhelmingly established. His conviction by the trial judge can therefore not be faulted," unquote. Chief Justice, this is one for you to keep. Justice Moore's graphic and eloquent use of the Queen's English permeated beyond his legal career. for he also had a career in radio broadcasting and distinguished himself in cricket commentaries. He also offered his opinions on radio programs such as Viewpoints and Sports View. Justice Moore served as a member of the Judicial and Legal Service Commission of the ECSC from 1999 to 2000, as well as on the Rules and Revision Committee of the ECSE during the same period. He also served in other capacities as an honorary Master of the Bench at Lincoln's Inn, London, Associate Member of the American Bar Association, and as a Fellow of the Commonwealth Judicial Institute. Between 1972 and 2006, he lectured not only at the University of Guyana, but as well as visiting professor at Florida State University, and participated in lecture tours in the Republic of South Africa in 2004. Justice Moore authored several publications, including Offshore Banking, Friend or Foe, Commonwealth Secretariat, that's the publisher, The Right to a Fair Trial and Access to Justice in the Commonwealth Caribbean, and a Manual for Police Prosecutors in the Commonwealth Caribbean. He served on several commission of inquiries held in Florida, the Bahamas, Bermuda, Grenada, and the Montserrat. Here in Guyana, Justice Moore served as the Loan Commissioner and Chairman of various commissions of inquiry held between 1970 and 1990. More recently, in 2019, Justice Moore was hired by the Ethnic Relations Commission, along with Lloyd Smith and Jairam Pitam, to conduct an investigation into the hiring practices of GCOM on allegations that former Acting Deputy Chief Elections Officer Vishnu Prasad was overlooked because of his ethnicity, despite him being the top-ranking candidate. In finding that Vishnu Prasad was indeed the most qualified candidate for the position of DCEO, Justice Moore, as chairman of the subcommittee of the ERC, conducted investigations and presented its report to the ERC. In essence, he found it against GCOM that hired him. He found it against GCOM, against the establishment, demonstrating his independence and the type of fortitude and mettle to his character that permeated his life in and out of the law. In the report submitted to GCOM, Justice Moore commented on Guyana's multicultural and multi-ethnic society and the need for tolerance in all spheres. His admonitions can be elevated to an aspirational national ethos for which we must all strive as citizens. He stated, I quote, "Every citizen is entitled to be treated fairly and justly in all spheres of national life, but more so in the public sector. We can all drum together to a unique Guyanese rhythm and sing our national songs together with one voice. That should be the vision for all of us as we strive towards the ethnic fusion that lies at the heart of our national life," unquote. Just last year, the Guyana Bar Association honored Justice Moore for his illustrious 50-year career in the legal profession. I was privileged to be present. He spoke, and I sadly observed that age and health were finally taking a toll both on his body and mind. He was in a wheelchair, but yet still I recall him having the presence of mind to dedicate a large portion of his speech to his wonderful, loving, and supportive companion, Mistress Moore, who stood by his side for decades of their marriage. In paying homage to this legal eagle, I can do no better than adopt the words of Queen's Counsel Harvey Tynes, who during a ceremony to mark Justice Moore's retirement from the Supreme Court of Bahamas in 2002, described Justice Moore as a man of great wisdom and said this, I quote, "The fear is born of the awesome responsibility to do justice to a man who is exalted in thought, expression, and bearing. The deference is born of a desire to do justice to a man of unusual intellectual and moral worth, to a man of nobility and grandeur, to a man who represents the perfect blend of the finest quality which every judge ought to possess, to a man who over a period of 3 short years, Bahamas lawyers have come to regard as a friend and as a brother, unquote. I believe I speak for all lawyers in Guyana and as head of the bar when I say that we have been exceptionally honored by the life, contributions, and legacy of this legal luminary. On behalf of the legal profession, on behalf of the government of Guyana, on behalf of the Attorney General Chambers, and of course personally, I wish to thank Stanley Moore for his exceptional work to the legal profession, his country, and indeed jurisprudence across the Commonwealth. To his wife and children and relatives, I offer my deepest condolences, and a grateful nation thank them for lending us this outstanding son. Thank you.